The Room 5A Mystery Praia da Luz, a quaint little coastal town on the Algarve coast of Portugal. In May 2007, the sun bathed the cobbled streets in gold. Waves lapped lazily at the shore, and the air was filled with the laughter of British tourists, escaping the gloom of home. But beneath that postcard perfection, Praia da Luz had shadows, narrow alleys where the sun never quite reached, quiet corners that held their breath when night fell. And on one such evening, in a town drunk on the ease of holiday life, those shadows swallowed a child whole. A little girl vanished, as if into thin air. It was the evening of May 3, 2007. Apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort looked perfectly unremarkable. Ground floor, 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, and a small living space. Nothing suggested that this ordinary room would soon become infamous, dissected, discussed, and debated for decades to come. Inside slept 3 children. Madeleine McCann, barely 3 years old, with bright blue eyes and blonde hair, and her younger twin siblings, Sean and Amelie. Their parents, Gary and Kate McCann, were just 50 meters away, dining at the resort's tapas bar with a circle of friends. They weren't neglectful, at least. They told themselves they weren't. Every 20 to 30 minutes, one of the adults would return to the apartment to check on the kids. At 9 p.m., Gary McCann performed his check. He crossed the cobbled pathway, entered apartment 5A, and peeked inside the children's bedroom. Madeleine was there, lying under her covers, peaceful and undisturbed. Satisfied, he returned to dinner, reassured. By 9:30 p.m., Matt Oldfield, a friend from the group, took his turn. But rather than entering fully, he only listened by the door, hearing the twins' soft breathing, but failing to confirm Madeleine's presence with his eyes. A small oversight that would later haunt him endlessly. Then came 10 p.m. Kate McCann stood from the dinner table, her chair scraping ominously on the stone floor, and walked the familiar path to the apartment. The night was darker than usual, the alleys quieter, the air strangely still. As she reached the door, she noticed something odd. The bedroom door was ajar, wider than before. A chill snaked down her spine. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Silence, the kind of suffocating silence that presses on your ears. Then her eyes found the bed, Madeleine's bed. It was empty, the sheets were askew. The window was cracked open. The curtain swayed gently with the breeze, and in that instant, Kate McCann screamed a raw, primal sound that tore through the night and still echoes in Praia da Luz. They've taken her. Someone's taken her. Panic descended like a suffocating fog. Gary McCann sprinted to the apartment. Friends scattered in all directions, searching, shouting Madeleine's name into the cold dark. The resort, a daytime paradise, had become a labyrinth of dread. Did someone lift Madeleine out the window, out the front door? Did they creep silently, or did the children stir in their sleep as a stranger's hands reached into their world? There were no answers, only questions, multiplying with every desperate search. The police, the GNR, arrived sluggishly, their efforts marred by delay and inexperience. No one cordoned off the apartment. Curious onlookers trampled through room 5A. Evidence, if it existed, was trampled, smeared, erased by well-meaning hands. And so began one of the most notorious disappearances in modern history. Madeleine McCann, 3 years old, had vanished from her bed in a safe, busy holiday resort, while her parents dined mere steps away. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. And yet, it was real. That night, Praia da Luz wasn't just dark, it was devoured by an abyss, the kind that swallows children, devours truths, and spits out conspiracy theories. Everyone became a suspect. Everything was a clue. And in the center of the maelstrom stood room 5A, a room that had quietly transformed from holiday comfort to haunted space. And yet, this was just the beginning. The hours that should have saved her, the clock was ticking, but not in the way people hope. Every passing second after a child disappears is like sand through an hourglass. You can't flip back. But in Praia da Luz that night, the hourglass wasn't just running, it was cracking. When Kate McCann's scream shattered the night air, the first instinct was chaos. Gary sprinted from the tapas bar, footsteps pounding on the cobbled path. His mind, usually rational and methodical, was a blur of panic. By the time he reached room 5A, neighbors and holiday guests had already begun swarming the scene. They checked under beds, inside closets, behind curtains. They sprinted down corridors, through alleyways, even to the beach. Every shadow was a threat, every silhouette a potential kidnapper. But Madeleine was nowhere. It was close to 10:15 p.m. when the resort staff called the local police, the Guarda Nacional Republicana GNR. But their response was not the rapid high-alert protocol that you might imagine for a missing child. It was Praia da Luz. After all, a sleepy town where serious crime was as foreign as the British tourists. 2 officers arrived. They examined the window that Kate insisted had been tampered with, the shutters, the latch, the way that curtains moved in the breeze. But by then, too many people had passed through the room. Friends, staff, neighbors, all trampling through a crime scene, obliterating footprints, fingerprints, any hope of untouched evidence. By midnight, the seriousness of the situation began to sink in. More officers arrived, but it was disorganized, sluggish. There was no immediate lockdown of the resort, no roadblocks, no sweeping search perimeter. The notion of an international abduction was still just a whisper, if even that. Witnesses later claimed that people could still come and go from the Ocean Club resort freely, well into the early morning. No security, no urgency. Somewhere in the darkness, if Madeleine's abductor was still around, they might have been watching, grinning at how easy it had all been. Gary McCann, frantic, called family back in the UK. One of the first to be informed was Jill Renwick, a family friend, who immediately went to the media. By the next morning, May 4th, the British press was already picking up the story, and yet, the local police treated it more like a case of a wandering child than an abduction. They initially wondered if Madeleine had simply woken up, felt lonely, and wandered off into the night, despite being only 3 years old, in an unfamiliar country, in pitch darkness. But Kate was certain, absolutely certain, that someone had been in that room. The window was open, the shutters up, the curtain flapping. Madeleine couldn't have managed that on her own. Then came the first cracks in the investigation. It turned out that the shutters could not have been forced open from the outside, not without causing visible damage. And yet, they were up when Kate entered the room. Had the abductor been inside the apartment before, hiding in wait, or did someone with access unlock them from within, then slip out unnoticed? Or, as darker whispers began to suggest, was it possible that no one had entered through the window at all? Within hours, theories began to breed like bacteria. There was no CCTV in the resort, no proper timeline, no clear eyewitness. The McCann's account stood, but doubts sprouted. And then there was Jane Tanner, a member of the McCann's holiday group Yope. Jane claimed that around 9:15 p.m., while heading back to check on her own child, she saw a man carrying a small blonde girl in pajamas crossing the street near the apartment. She thought little of it at the time, apparent perhaps. But in hindsight, the memory became a vital clue. She described the man dark-haired, thin, wearing light-colored trousers. The child, pale blonde in light-colored pajamas. It was the sighting that would haunt the case for years. But the street where she saw this, Gary McCann himself had stood there minutes earlier, talking to a friend. Yet neither of them saw the man Jane described. Still, this sighting became the first tangible lead. The shadowy figure, the faceless man with a child in his arms, disappearing into the night. But where did he go? As morning broke over Praia da Luz, what should have been a celebratory dawn was instead a suffocating fog of dread and guilt. The McCanns stood in their apartment, haggard, hollow-eyed, while Portuguese police continued their halting investigation. Word spread rapidly. Journalists flew in. Cameras swarmed the sleepy streets. The image of Madeleine, that now iconic photo of her smiling in a pink sun hat, was plastered across newspapers, posters, and television screens. But with every camera, flash, every headline, another clock was ticking. The clock of public opinion. Sympathy was plentiful, but suspicion was not far behind. Why had the McCanns left their children alone? Why didn't anyone hear a struggle? And why was there no trace of forced entry? By the end of that day, one thing was clear. This was no longer just a missing child case. It was a mystery, a riddle, a waking nightmare draped in the golden hues of a tourist town, now forever stained. Somewhere, someone knew the truth about what happened in room 5A, and the world was about to become obsessed with finding out. Suspicions in the sunlight the morning after Madeleine McCann vanished. The sun still rose over Praia de Luz, as if nothing had changed. The waves still kissed the shoreline. Tourists still sipped their coffees, but beneath the calm, something rotten was beginning to fester. The police had no leads, no ransom note, no trace of Madeleine, not a strand of hair, not a shoe, not a footprint. The only thing left behind was a vacuum, and nature, human nature, abhors a vacuum. So, it began to fill that emptiness with theories, with rumors, with blame. By May 5th, the Portuguese police, the Polícia Judiciária, a more serious criminal investigation unit, had taken over the case. They were skeptical of the GNR's sloppy first response, but privately, they were also skeptical of the McCanns. In Portugal, the cultural approach to parenting was different. Leaving children unattended while dining out, even just meters away, was not just frowned upon. It was unthinkable. The PJ detectives couldn't fathom the McMoyns' decision to leave 3 toddlers alone while enjoying wine and tapas with friends. Their incredulity bred suspicion. Still, the initial days focused outward. Police canvassed the area, questioned resort staff, neighbors, known criminals in the region. They searched abandoned buildings, wells, and scrublands surrounding Praia da Luz. But every search came up empty. Every path led to nowhere. The only concrete clue remained Jane Tanner's sighting of the man carrying a child. Based on her description, police crafted a sketch, a faceless, generic outline of a man, anonymous, forgettable. But it was something. Days stretched into weeks, and the media storm intensified. The McCanns, now permanent fixtures on global news, appeared in press conferences, clutching Madeleine's stuffed pink cuddle cat toy. Kate McCann, pale and withdrawn, always held it close, a tangible fragment of her missing daughter. Yet, the more they appeared, the more polarized public perception became. Some saw desperate, grieving parents. Others saw something off. Kate's demeanor, in particular, drew scrutiny. She was composed, even cold, some said. She didn't cry enough. She wasn't hysterical enough. People wanted a Shakespearean display of grief, sobbing, collapsing, wailing, but Kate held herself tightly, a controlled mask behind which, some argued, a darker truth might lurk. And then, there was the cuddle cat. Journalists whispered, why was the stuffed toy always so pristine, so clean, when it was Madeleine's cherished companion? Kate admitted she'd washed it, a detail that shouldn't matter, yet did. Why would a grieving mother wash away the last scent, the last trace of her missing child? The tide of suspicion had begun to shift. By July 2007, 2 months after the disappearance, the Portuguese police privately began exploring the unthinkable. What if Madeleine hadn't been taken by a stranger? What if the answer was far closer to home? Their working theory, an accident. Perhaps Madeleine had died in the apartment, a fall, an overdose of sedatives, and the McCanns, in a blind panic, had hidden the body, then staged an abduction. It sounded outlandish, implausible, but the police couldn't ignore the inconsistencies. Specialist cadaver dogs were brought in from the UK. They were trained to detect the scent of human remains, and when let loose in apartment 5A, one dog, Eddie, alerted behind the living room sofa. Another alert was triggered in the parents' rental car, hired weeks after Madeleine's disappearance. It was explosive. The British press ran with the story. Blood found in McCann's rental car. Headlines screamed, though the forensic results were murky at best. Partial DNA. Inconclusive evidence the damage was done. In September 2007, 4 months after their daughter vanished, Gary and Kate McCann were officially declared Argado's formal suspects under Portuguese law. The world watched in stunned fascination as the grieving parents morphed into potential perpetrators in the public eye. Documentaries, articles, and amateur sleuths dissected every interview, every movement, every misplaced word. Did Kate's controlled composure hide guilt? Was Jerry's insistence on media management a sign of a man calculating his defense, rather than seeking his child? What about the friends, the so-called Tapas 7, who supported their alibi? Conspiracy theories bloomed like dark flowers. Yet for all the suspicion, no hard evidence emerged. No confession, no body, no witnesses. The McCanns flew home to the UK, battered but defiant, still proclaiming their innocence, still demanding the search continue. The Portuguese investigation, meanwhile, began to stall. Theories became political. British media pressure accused the PJ of botching the case, of deflecting blame onto the parents to save face. By July 2008, the Argido status was dropped. The case was shelved, unsolved, unresolved, unfinished. But the story, the obsession, was far from over. In the years to come, new detectives, private investigators, psychics, and internet sleuths would all take their turn at the puzzle. And each time, the shadows shifted, reshaped, but never fully retreated. What happened to Madeleine McCann? Everyone had an answer, and no one knew the truth. The official investigation may have stalled, but the McCanns weren't finished. Their daughter was still missing, their lives still gutted, and the police, both British and Portuguese, had failed to produce results. So, they did what desperate, resourceful people do. They went private. The McCanns assembled their own team of investigators, funded by donations and a hefty sum from a media deal. At the center of this effort was Método 3, a controversial Spanish detective agency known for bold promises and less than stellar delivery. Francisco Marco, the head of Método 3, confidently declared they'd have Madeleine home by Christmas. He gave interviews, made public appeals, boasted of imminent breakthroughs. But Christmas came and went. No Madeleine, no arrest, no closure. Instead, what followed was a parade of false leads, blurry photos, and sightings of blonde girls in every corner of the globe. There was the supermarket sighting in Morocco, a blonde girl with a woman in a headscarf. Tourists snapped photos from afar, feeding the fires of hope and dread. But the child wasn't Madeleine, just another blonde, European child with unfortunate timing. Then there were whispers of pedophile rings operating across Europe, snatching children to order. Matudo 3 flirted with these theories, claiming Madeleine had been abducted by a well-organized group. The McCanns, too, entertained the idea. It was an easier pill to swallow than the void of no explanation at all. But nothing solid ever emerged. The leads fizzled. The funding wavered. The McCanns cut ties with Matodo 3, their promises as empty as the bed in room 5A. Then, another twist. Kevin Halligan, a shadowy figure claiming intelligence ties, offered his services. His firm, Oakley International, promised high-tech surveillance, elite resources, secret contacts. The McCanns paid hundreds of thousands of pounds, but Halligan was a fraud. He lived lavishly on their money, staying in luxury hotels, drinking vintage wine, all while producing next to nothing. Eventually, he was exposed, arrested for fraud, and the US time was slipping away. And yet, the sightings never stopped. People claimed to see Madeleine in Malta, Sweden, Dubai. A tourist thought they spotted her on a plane. Another swore she was on a yacht in the Caribbean. Every blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl became a ghost of Madeleine. The McCanns chased them all. They couldn't afford not to, because each photo, each shaky video, each whispered tip carried the same brutal question. What if this time it's real? But each time it wasn't. Meanwhile, the media circus became grotesque. Newspapers sensationalized every rumor. TV shows ran dramatic reenactments. Theories morphed into accusations. The McCanns sued some tabloids for libel and won, but the damage was irreversible. Public opinion fractured. Some still saw grieving parents clinging to hope. Others saw opportunists milking sympathy, spinning stories to cover a dark secret. And then came the internet. Forums, blogs, YouTube channels, all dissecting every detail. Amateur sleuths appointed themselves judges, juries, and sometimes executioners. They analyzed Kate's body language, Jerry's interviews, the friends' timelines. Some believed in the abduction theory. Others were convinced the McCanns accidentally killed Madeleine and staged the disappearance. No one agreed. But no one could look away. Years passed. Praia da Luz returned to its sleepy routines. But the apartment, room 5A, stood tainted, a grim tourist stop for the morbidly curious. And Madeleine, she became the girl in the poster, the child who never aged, frozen in time, forever. 3 years old in the public eye. But the case wasn't dead yet, because in 2011, the British government stepped in. Under pressure from media campaigns and public outcry, they launched Operation Grange, a new police investigation by Scotland Yard, a new team, new eyes, new hope. But would it be enough? The shadows of Praia da Luz still whispered. The ghosts still lingered, and somewhere, maybe a woman in her teens or 20s might have looked in the mirror and wondered, am I that girl? Am I Madeleine McCann? But if she did, the world never heard her answer. By 2011, the Madeleine McCann case had drifted, not solved, not closed. BUT stalled. Then British Prime Minister David Cameron, after a very public plea from the McCanns and relentless media pressure, ordered Scotland Yard to review the case under the codename Operation Grange. Their mission wasn't to investigate from scratch, at least, not initially. It was to review the mountain of files, reports, interviews, and failures left behind by the Portuguese authorities. But the deeper they looked, the more they realized something chilling. The first investigation had been a mess. Files were incomplete. Leads were left hanging. Some evidence was mishandled or simply lost. Operation Grange, faced with this chaotic puzzle, decided to open a full investigation in 2013. The case was reborn. Their first approach: strip away every theory, every bias, and start with the simplest question: was Madeleine abducted by a stranger? There. Conclusion: probably yes. The British press reignited their coverage. Journalists flooded back to Praia da Luz, Scotland Yard, released new EFIT images of a suspect. The infamous Tanner man was re-examined, and a new theory emerged. Perhaps the man Jane Tanner saw wasn't an abductor at all. Perhaps he was just a father carrying his own child home from a nearby crèche. This lead fizzled out quickly. Then Scotland Yard proposed a new timeline, suggesting that the window of opportunity for the abduction was narrower than previously thought. There was another sighting, a blonde girl being carried by a man around 10 p.m., but like the others, it led to a dead end. Years passed. The McCanns grew grayer, more exhausted, still hoping, still waiting. Then, in 2020, a seismic shift. German authorities publicly announced they had a prime suspect, a man already imprisoned for unrelated crimes. His name, Christian Bruckner, a convicted sex offender with a long history of abusing children. Christian Bruckner was living in the Algarve in 2007. He drove a battered camper van, lived off-grid, and had a rap sheet that read like a predator's diary. German prosecutors declared, with startling confidence, that they believed Madeleine McCann was dead, and that Bruckner had killed her. But they provided no body, no forensic evidence, no confession. What they had were fragments, phone records placing Bruckner near the Ocean Club on the night of the disappearance. A reported confession Bruckner allegedly made while drunk, claiming he knew what happened to Maddie. A disturbing history of sexual violence against minors. Yet even now, the evidence felt ... circumstantial. Prosecutors hinted they had more. But years passed, and still, no charges. Public interest flared again. Documentaries aired. Social media buzzed. But as of today, Christian Bruckner remains a suspect, a shadow in the periphery, not a convicted killer of Madeleine McCann. And still, there is no body, no definitive proof of life or death. The McCanns, worn by years of hope and heartbreak, released a quiet statement: "We hang on to the hope, however small, that we will see Madeleine again, because without proof, a part of them and the world clings to the possibility that she's alive. Somewhere, someone. A woman in her 20s might wake up, brush her hair, glance in the mirror, and wonder why she doesn't quite fit anywhere. Or, perhaps, the truth is darker, buried deep in the soil of Praia da Luz, or beyond, under cement, forgotten. A girl swallowed by shadows, and a case that refuses to die." Madeleine McCann was 3 years old when she vanished, but in the years that followed, she became more than a child. She became a symbol, a puzzle, a myth wrapped in tabloid headlines and internet forums, in documentaries and police briefings. Somehow, she became the girl the world couldn't forget. Other children went missing, thousands, every year, yet their names barely reached beyond local news. But Madeleine, she was everywhere. Her face, those wide, inquisitive eyes, the faint coloboma in her iris, stared out from posters, TV screens, and online banners. The question is, why her? Some say it was the timing. In 2007, the internet was maturing, social media was spreading, true crime was flourishing, and the world was increasingly connected. A missing girl, blonde and photogenic, from a middle-class family. It was a story tailor-made for global obsession. But it wasn't just the media. The case itself was a labyrinth. No body, no crime scene, no solid evidence, just a gaping hole where certainty should be. And humans hate uncertainty. We fill gaps with theories, with conspiracies, with monsters. The McCanns didn't fit the traditional image of grieving parents, at least not to everyone. Too polished, too controlled. In every interview, people looked for cracks. When Kate didn't cry, they asked why. When she did, they wondered if it was staged. They became Rorschach tests for public perception. Then came the internet detectives. Forums like the Madeleine McCann case files, Reddit threads, YouTube analysis, all dissecting every statement, every timeline, every photograph. People mapped Pryor, Daluz, analyzed the floor plan of apartment 5A, reconstructed the tapas dinner schedules to the minute. They built their own suspects. Some said it was the parents. Others believed in a pedophile ring operating across Portugal. Some insisted Madeleine was trafficked and still alive. There were even psychics claiming visions, insisting she was buried here, or alive there, or reincarnated elsewhere. The more time passed, the less this was about Madeleine the child, the person, and more about Madeleine the concept. She became the ghost of our anxieties, a symbol of what could happen to any child, anywhere. A reminder that safety is an illusion. And yet, for all the theories, for all the headlines, the truth remains trapped somewhere, just beyond reach. Perhaps the saddest part is this: if Madeleine McCann were to walk into the light tomorrow, grown, alive, would the world recognize her? Or has the myth already consumed the girl? As of now, the case remains unsolved. Leads continue to flicker and fade. The German suspect, Christian Bruckner, is still in prison, still uncharged for Madeleine's disappearance. And the McCanns still wait. Madeleine's bedroom remains untouched, preserved as it was the day she left for Portugal, a shrine to a daughter suspended in time. Every year, on her birthday, the McCanns light a candle and hope. But the rest of the world, we've turned her into a story we tell ourselves in the dark, a cautionary tale, a whispered legend of a girl who vanished, who became a ghost in the collective mind, whose eyes still stare out from posters that grow older, even though she never did. And that is the deepest mystery of all.